For years, Jon Stewart traded his comedy stage for the halls of Congress, fighting for the men and women who ran toward danger on September 11th. In this fiery moment, he calls out lawmakers for stalling on health care and compensation for first responders left sick and forgotten. His frustration is raw, his message is clear, and his passion is impossible to ignore. What unfolds is a stark reminder of how bureaucracy can fail the very heroes who saved lives. Stick around to see why this moment sparked national outrage and renewed action for the 9/11 community.
A filled room of 9/11 first responders, and in front of me, a nearly empty Congress. Sick and dying, they brought themselves down here to speak to no one. It's shameful. It's an embarrassment to the country, and it is a stain on this institution. And you should be ashamed of yourselves for those that aren't here, but you won't be. Because accountability doesn't appear to be something that occurs in this chamber. We don't want to be here. Lou doesn't want to be here. None of these people want to be here. But they are, and they're not here for themselves. They're here to continue fighting for what's right. Lou's going to go back for his 69th chemo. The great Ray Pfeiffer would come down here, his body riddled with cancer and pain, where he couldn't walk. And the disrespect shown to him and to the other lobbyists on this bill is utterly unacceptable. You know, I would be so angry at the latest injustice that's done to these men and women, and another business card thrown our way as a way of shooing us away, like children trick-or-treating, rather than the heroes that they are and will always be. Ray would say, "Calm down, Johnny, calm down. I got all the cards I need." And he would tap his pocket.
The debate over support for 9/11 first responders has resurfaced once again, and this time, Jon Stewart is directing sharp criticism toward Congress. His remarks have renewed public attention on a long-running issue that has repeatedly returned to the national spotlight. Whether the men and women who responded to the September 11th attacks are receiving the long-term care and financial support they were promised.
The official FDNY response time to 9/11 was 5 seconds. 5 seconds. That's how long it took for FDNY, for NYPD, for Port Authority, for EMS to respond to an urgent need from the public. 5 seconds. Hundreds died in an instant. Thousands more poured in to continue to fight for their brothers and sisters. The breathing problem started almost immediately, and they were told they weren't sick, they were crazy. And then, as the illnesses got worse and things became more apparent, well, okay, you're sick, but it's not from the pile. And then, when the science became irrefutable, okay, it's the pile. But this is a New York issue. I don't know if we have the money. And I'm sorry if I sound angry and undiplomatic, but I'm angry. And you should be too, and they're all angry as well. And they have every justification to be that way. There is not a person here, there is not an empty chair on that stage that didn't tweet out, "Never forget the heroes of 9/11. Never forget their bravery. Never forget what they did, what they gave to this country." Well, here they are. And where are they? And it would be one thing if their callous indifference and rank hypocrisy were benign, but it's not. Your indifference costs these men and women their most valuable commodity, time. It's the one thing they're running out of. This should be flipped. This hearing should be flipped. These men and women should be up on that stage, and Congress should be down here answering their questions as to why this is so damn hard and takes so damn long. And why, no matter what they get, something's always pulled back, and they got to come back.
At the center of the discussion is the lasting impact that exposure to hazardous conditions has had on thousands of firefighters, police officers, emergency medical personnel, and other responders. Many have spent years coping with serious illnesses linked to their work at Ground Zero, making continued federal assistance a matter of ongoing public concern rather than a closed chapter in history.
Hurricanes and tornadoes, but this wasn't a hurricane, and this wasn't a tornado. And by the way, that's your job anyway. We can't fund these programs, you can. Setting aside that no American in this country should face financial ruin because of a health issue. Certainly 9/11 first responders shouldn't have to decide whether to live or to have a place to live. And the idea that you can only give them 5 more years of the VCF because you're not quite sure what's going to happen 5 years from now, well, I can tell you, I'm pretty sure what's going to happen 5 years from now. More of these men and women are going to get sick, and they are going to die. And I am awfully tired of hearing that it's a 9/11 New York issue. Al-Qaeda didn't shout death to Tribeca. They attacked America, and these men and women, and their response to it, is what brought our country back. It's what gave a reeling nation a solid foundation to stand back upon, to remind us of why this country is great, of why this country is worth fighting for, and you are ignoring them. And you can end it tomorrow. Why this bill isn't unanimous consent and a standalone issue is beyond my comprehension. And I have yet to hear a reasonable explanation for why. It'll get stuck in some transportation bill or some appropriations bill and get sent over to the Senate, where a certain someone from the Senate will use it as a political football to get themselves maybe another new import tax on petroleum, because that's what happened to us in 2015. And we won't allow it to happen again. Thank God for people like John Field. Thank God for people like Ray Pfeiffer. Thank God for all of these people who will not let it happen. They responded in 5 seconds. They did their jobs with courage, grace, tenacity, humility. 18 years later, do yours. Thank you.
Watching Jon Stewart walk into that congressional hearing room, you could feel immediately that this wasn't going to be a typical Capitol Hill moment. He wasn't there as a comedian looking for laughs. He was there as an advocate, flanked by sick and dying first responders, many of whom had spent years fighting for a fund that was supposed to take care of them after they ran toward danger on the worst day in American history. What struck me first was the visual he pointed out himself, a room packed with firefighters, police officers, and survivors, facing a dais that was nearly empty of the lawmakers meant to hear them. That image alone told the story before Stewart even opened his mouth. What makes this moment so powerful, in my opinion, is the contrast Stewart drew between the speed of the first responders' sacrifice and the slowness of the government's response to it. He noted that these men and women reacted in a matter of seconds on September 11th, while Congress had taken years, even decades in some cases, to guarantee the funding these same people needed to survive. That comparison isn't just clever rhetoric, it's a genuinely damning indictment of bureaucratic priorities, and it's the kind of framing that cuts through political noise because it's so simple and so hard to argue against. When someone lays out that kind of moral math in front of cameras, it forces everyone watching to sit with an uncomfortable truth about how we treat the people we call heroes once the cameras from the actual tragedy have moved on. I also think it's worth examining why this clip resonated so widely beyond the hearing room itself. Stewart has spent years building credibility on this exact issue, showing up again and again long after the news cycle moved past 9/11 anniversaries, and that consistency gave his anger weight rather than making it feel like a one-off publicity moment. There's a lesson there about advocacy in general. The loudest voice isn't always the most effective one, but the most persistent voice often is. Stewart wasn't performing outrage for a single news cycle. He was cashing in years of quiet, repeated pressure, and that's part of why lawmakers who might otherwise brush off criticism found it much harder to ignore him in that room. At the same time, I think it's fair to push back gently on how this story gets simplified in retrospect. Some of the lawmakers who were absent later noted they were tracking the hearing from their offices or attending to other committee business, which is a normal part of how Capitol Hill operates on any given day. That doesn't excuse the optics, and optics matter enormously in politics, but it's worth acknowledging that empty chairs don't always mean indifference. Where I think the criticism holds up completely, though, is in the outcome it forced. The bill advanced out of committee unanimously almost immediately afterward, which suggests that public pressure, once properly focused, can still move a process that had been stalled for years. Ultimately, what stays with me watching this back is a simple, uncomfortable question. Why does it take a viral moment of public shaming for basic obligations to survivors of a national tragedy to get addressed? My honest take is that Stewart's testimony worked precisely because he refused to let institutional inertia hide behind procedural excuses, and that's a tactic more citizens and advocates could stand to learn from. Accountability in government rarely arrives on its own schedule. It usually has to be demanded, loudly and repeatedly, by people willing to stand in a room and say the uncomfortable thing everyone else was avoiding. That, more than any single quote from the hearing, is the lasting takeaway here.